Good evening, friends. Welcome to the India Power Talk. India Power Talk is a knowledge sharing initiative. We invite international thought leaders and domain experts to share their insights, experiences, and strategies related to business and economy. The result is an easily accessible digital source of knowledge that benefits not only Indian entrepreneurs and policymakers, but also international businesses, investors, and strategic partners who have invested in or intend to invest in India. Our speakers include entrepreneurs, economists, professors, investment bankers, inventors, scientists, lawyers, chartered accountants, and other senior professionals with experience in diverse sectors. Today, we will talk about Indo-German business cooperation. Trade between the two countries has a rich and mutually rewarding tradition reaching back to 500 years. Today, Germany is India's #1 European trading partner. Germany's internationally admired leadership in many industries is thanks to a large extent of the country's dual education system. Students receive a theoretical education while undergoing practical training directly within the companies. The German Chamber of Commerce have made this dual education available in India at the Indo-German Training Center in several cities in India. In addition, various programs have been set up to facilitate the business opportunities in India, such as the fast track system for German companies or the Make in India initiative. A recent example of Indo-German cooperation is a memorandum of understanding between Siemens and Switch Mobility Automotive to cooperate on e-mobility in India. Siemens CEO Sunil Mathur commented, "We intend to implement high-quality techno-commercial solutions to address the needs of growing e-mobility market in India." Indian investments in Germany have also significantly increased over recent years, especially in sectors of IT, automotive, pharma, and biotech. This outstanding economic cooperation will be instrumental in both countries' recovery from the pandemic. It's my pleasure to welcome a highly qualified guest to speak about Indo-German commerce, current initiatives and future plans, Mr. Bernhard Steinrücke, former Director General of Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, IGCC. The IGCC, which was founded in 1956, is headquartered in Mumbai, has 6 other offices in India and 1 in Düsseldorf. It also has 17 honorary representatives in smaller towns and cities in India to facilitate other businesses contacts among Indian and German companies. It is a highly respected institution in India and Germany with a team of over 100 qualified professionals. The services of IGCC offers a range of business partners, partner searches, support in capital company formation, and legal advice to HR recruitment, trading fairs, and training. Mr. Bernhard Steinrücke has been the Director General of IGCC since 2003, who recently retired. He is also a board member of various Indo-German and Indian companies. He studied law and economics and received a law degree with distinction. His involvement with the IGCC began as early as 1993, when he became a committee member and treasurer. Mr. Steinrücke has been a program ambassador for the German Chancellor Fellowship since 2013. He has been the world speaker for the German Chamber of Commerce abroad since 2016. So, Mr. Steinrücke, welcome to the India Power Talk, and thank you so much for taking time to join me. You have a vast experience in India. Now, please, could you begin by talking about how you first became interested in the country and its business community?
First of all, Nitin, thank you very, very much for inviting me for the India Power Talk. It's an honor for me to be with you today. My first interest in the country was more or less by accident. It was in 1993. I was the Director General, or the General Manager, it was called, of Deutsche Bank in Sri Lanka. And I got a call from my boss in Singapore. And he said, you know, we need someone in India. Would you be interested? So I told him in 1993 that I have never been to India. I don't know the country. I know it is difficult. But I will be there anyway in Mumbai, at that time Bombay, next week. So I told him that I would be interested, but I would like to first go have a look and then decide. So he said, no, nothing doing. You have to decide now. So I thought, oh, that man has a problem. So I said, okay, I will do it. And I went. And so it was more by accident than by choice, but I never regretted it.
Great. That was really very quick and I guess very interesting introduction to India for you.
It was indeed, and as accident would have it, the first Indian woman I met in my life on that 17th of March 1993 in the morning when I came to India. Today is my wife for 25 years.
Wow. That's a very strong bond with India, I must say.
Indeed.
Okay. Dr. Steinrücke, the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce is very active, as I mentioned to you, on many fronts. And thanks to the leadership of you and many other people who worked in the chamber for several years. Now, could you tell us what are some of the favorite current highlights with the IGCC?
Well, of course, certainly at the moment, the pandemic has influenced everything that everybody is doing. So from that angle, I would say at the moment, one of the highlights is an initiative by the Chamber to bring companies, member companies together with their Corona activities. So SAP has developed a special IT system where companies can interact, can communicate with their Corona initiatives. And I think that is something very, very important. German companies over the last decades have been active when there was a dire need in India, whether it was the earthquake in Bosch, whether it was the tsunami, whether it was other calamities. German companies were always there to help. And I think that at the moment is the most important activity.
I see. Great. Mr. Steinrücke, as I mentioned in the introduction, commerce between Germany and India has a long history and continues to develop. Now, in what way has the relationship really grown in the recent years, and where do you really see room for further improvement? And I would appreciate if you could really dwell a little more upon that.
Well, indeed, we can go back 500 years when the first traders from Germany came to India, initially, incidentally, on Portuguese ships. And then, of course, more than 100 years ago, Siemens, for instance, started with their telegraphic line from London to Kolkata. And many other companies, you mentioned Bayer, came more than 100 years ago. But the real, of course, start was after the Second World War with the steel plant in Rourkela and with the first license agreement between Mercedes-Benz and the Tatas at that time.
I see.
Really, the improvement came, though, only after the liberalization of the Indian economy in 1991. And then the boost, I would say, was after 2003, when India basically overcame the Asia crisis, and when basically German companies, after reunification, after the concentration of the development of Eastern Europe, and when they look beyond China. That is when the Germany boom, I would say, in India started after 2003. And this is when we saw, for instance, development in Pune. Today in Pune, we have more than 300 German companies, and most of them came after 2006, 2007. And when we saw that India became sort of the darling in Asia of German companies, we had big initiatives in the trade fair business when India was the partner country of Hanover Fair in 2006. India was the partner country of Frankfurt Book Fair in 2006. India was the partner country of the ITB, the tourism fair in Berlin in 2007. In 2008, it was the partner country of ILA, the aviation show in Berlin. In 2010, it was the partner country of Bauma, the construction equipment fair in Munich. And we could continue like this. This is how basically in Germany, with Incredible India, India became very popular. And this is when German companies basically realized that they have to be in India. Then, of course, we had the Indo-German year 2000 2011-2012, infinite opportunities, where we had this big roadshow in India, Indo-German Urban Mela, where we presented up to 20 German companies in Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, and Pune, with more than 500,000 visitors. And then we established a strategic partnership between India and Germany, and we started the intergovernmental consultations, where the German Chancellor and the Indian Prime Minister meet every 2 years with their cabinet members to discuss the state of affairs and to discuss their strategic partnership. I think this development really gave a boost to Indo-German relations, not only for trade and investment, but also for employment. And when we see today how many people, German companies employ in India, directly and indirectly, and with agents, for instance, in the insurance industry, with franchise partners, with the dealers, we're talking about more than 500,000 people. And thus, Germany is one of the largest employer in India. And I think that is a quite spectacular development that we had in the last 15 years, and that holds, and that will go on.
Absolutely. You said around 500,000 Indians are employed directly by the German companies.
Directly and indirectly.
Yeah,
yes.
Sure. How many Germans? I guess a lot of Germans also must be working in India. So could you please dwell upon that?
Well, we don't have the official numbers, and actually there are not so many Germans in India. We're talking about maybe 8,000 Germans that are in India. Most of them actually are in Pune and in Delhi. But this has gone, I would say, down quite a bit in the recent years because we have so qualified Indians. So there is no need to have these very expensive expatriates because you have these outstanding Indians. And when you look at it today, different from the time when I came first in 1993, today most of the German companies in India are run by highly qualified Indian CEOs and MDs, and it's quite remarkable. But even if you look the other way around, few people know that in the German DAX companies, which are the largest German listed companies, in so many of them, we have Indians as members of the board. It's quite remarkable,
Yes.
Whether you look at Siemens or whether you look at, of course, Deutsche Bank was known when Andrew Jain was the big boss, or you look at a Merck, or you look at a Deutsche Telekom, even BASF had an Indian board member for many, many years. So it's quite remarkable to see how many Indians are actually on the boards of German companies.
Yes. So where do you see a room for further improvement between how do we develop more collaborative atmosphere?
Well, I think the room is vast because India is still one of the big growth markets in the world. German companies have such a good reputation here. So from that angle, I think there are vast opportunities. We can see it already, of course. Companies like Siemens or Bosch or others, they are household names in India. And also, interestingly enough, there are some 15 German companies that are listed in India. Besides Bosch, for instance, is the only country in the world where Bosch is listed, is in India. Because in Germany, it's a foundation. So globally, only in India, the Bosch subsidiary is listed. But also Siemens is listed, Merck is listed,
Bayer is listed, BASF listed.
Bayer is listed, BASF is listed. So many of the German companies are listed in India. And I think that is also quite a special situation. But when you look at the various industries, I see a lot of potential in the field of IT. So SAP, for instance, has had a dramatic development of some 50 people in the 1990s to now more than 15,000 direct employed, but some 40,000 SAP experts in the Indian companies. So SAP is very strong. But even when you look at Bosch, of course, will have been in India next year 100 years. Today, Bosch, of course, employs a lot of people with the listed company, but they even employ more people with their IT subsidiary. And today, more than 15,000 people are software engineers working in India for Bosch worldwide. And when Mr. Denner, the chairman of Bosch, was in India year before last, he made a statement that in a very near future, India will be the largest IT development hub of Bosch worldwide.
Wow.
So IT development, also when you look at Daimler, for instance, Daimler has an IT development company in Bangalore. They employ more than 6,000 software engineers that do the software development for Daimler globally. Siemens has also thousands of software engineers. So IT is a very, very strong sector for the German companies. Another sector that has been growing substantially in the recent year is the insurance sector. When you look at HDFC Ergo, when you look at Bajaj Allianz, they are market leaders in the industry, employing 100,000 of people, very successful, highly profitable. And that was also a huge development in the recent year. Deutsche Bank, for instance, has been in India, of course, for more than 4 decades, but also there for Deutsche Bank globally, India is one of the most successful ventures globally. And I think that is also quite remarkable. Or when you look at the logistics sector, DHL is the largest German logistic provider in India, with various companies, one of them even listed. Of course, they're not the only ones. There are many, many others. So in logistics, German companies are very, very strong in India.
Plus,
I could continue like that.
5 automotive companies are in India.
I'm sorry?
Your all top 5 automobile companies are in India.
Of course, Volkswagen and Mercedes and BMW, they are all in India. They have invested heavily. But of course, at the moment, the automotive industry is probably one of the most suffering industries because of the pandemic. And of course, that is also a challenge for the German companies. That is unfortunate, yeah.
Plus, I know there are really, really large chemical companies in German chemical companies in India.
Of course, there are big German chemical companies in India. BASF has invested heavily. A few years ago, they opened a development hub in Navi Mumbai, where they invested 60 million euros. It's one of the worldwide largest development hubs, very successful. And I have to say, seeing is believing. You have to have seen their labs over there is absolutely outstanding.
Great. No, this is spectacular. And Germany has been always my favorite destination as a corporate lawyer to work. And it has been really pleasure working with really lot of top-end German companies. Now, from the big companies, I know like India, Germany also has hundreds of mid-size, it's called as middle stand companies, mid-sized and family-owned companies. And I know many of them wish to do business. Many of them are doing business in India, and many of them wish to do business in India. Now, could you dwell upon some of them as to their structure, their way of working, and how do you see them working in India?
Well, you're absolutely right. And when you look at the sheer numbers, most of the German companies are still family-owned, so-called Mittelstand, way beyond 90%. And this also holds true for most of the 1,800 German companies present in India. Most of them are these family-owned Mittelstands companies. Of course, they are not the usual SMEs as we know them maybe in India, but they have been there for generations. Many of them are so-called hidden champions. That means they are world champions in their niche. Well, not that nobody knows them, but not so well known, but very, very successful. And many of them are, of course, in India, and also there, they are very successful. And I mean, company like Freudenberg, for instance, yeah, they have more than 10 subsidiaries in India. They are still family owned. They've been there for more than 200 years and highly successful, but not so well known. But in their niches, they are world champions. When you look at a company like Trumpf, owned by the family Leibinger, they are based in Pune. That is another good example. Or the company Stihl, owned by the family Stihl, again, based in Pune. Or when you look at a company Wirth, they have various subsidiaries in India, for instance, also in Pune. And again, family owned, very successful, and a big player in their niche. Or when you look at a company like Festo, that's a company has been in India for more than 50 years, based out of Bangalore, extremely successful and family owned. So I could go on like this.
I can imagine. Could you tell us, are there any similarities between the German family companies and Indian family companies, or I would really love to hear from you as to what should Indian family companies or small mid-sized companies should do, what precautions they should be taking when they strike collaborations with these family companies.
Actually, you're absolutely right, and there are quite some similarities. When you look at a company like Bharat Forge, Baba Kalyani, who incidentally is also on the committee of the chamber. Or when you look at a company like Force Motors, Ferodia, or when you look at a company like Bajaj Allianz, or many of the other, incidentally, many of them are also based in Pune. So somehow Pune is, we call it the Wolfsburg because of Volkswagen, or Sindelfingen because of Mercedes of India. But you could also call it the Mittelstand or family-owned hub of India, because many of the German family-owned companies are based out of Pune, and many of the Indians are based out of Pune. Maybe one of the main differences, I would say, between the Indian and the German family-owned companies is that many of the Indian companies are listed. The German Mittelstand is not listed. Most of them are not listed. Somehow they don't believe that being listed is necessary for their business. They believe in basically 100% ownership, and they are able, and they were able to fund their expansion over the years, over the decades, with their own resources. Because they believe in A, being profitable, and B, in keeping the money in the company. So therefore, different to the Indian family-owned companies, most of them are listed. The German family-owned companies are not. That is maybe the only big difference. Otherwise, in the approach, it's pretty similar. Basically, the saying is, we don't believe in quarters. We believe in generations.
Yes, that's the fundamental difference. That's the basic difference, I guess. I know for a fact, that when we talk of Indian companies, we'll always talk of the financial results, quarterly results, half-yearly results, whereas the German companies particularly, or even for that matter, some of the Japanese companies I have seen, they talk of generations, and they really talk of long-term investment and long-term stay in the respective countries. No, but I must say with a lot of conviction and confidence that I have seen the collaborations between Indian Middle-Eastern companies and German companies, and they're quite successfully running the joint ventures. Is there any specific advice that you would give? How could we how could we take it fast? How could we fast forward the collaborations? Because I know for a fact, Mr. Steinrücke, that there are a lot of mid-sized German companies who are still hungry to come to Indian market, and they are still waiting. So what could we do from India to really accelerate that process?
Well, I think a lot of things have happened in the last years, and many of the German SMEs have come to India with your help, with the Chamber's help, and with the help of many others. Also, the embassy, the consulates were very supportive. So from that angle, I think a lot of things have happened already. We also have the initiative of the Indian embassy in Germany, Make in India Mittelstand is an initiative that has also brought quite a few German Mittelstand companies to India. And of course, at the moment, we have the challenge of Corona, which is a sort of hindrance for everybody. But that will go. There is no doubt about it. So as soon as Corona is behind us, the main thing is that we have to have a very, very good image of India. And the image building is something where India was extremely successful with Incredible India, with Make in India, with other initiatives. So this, after Corona, we have to reactivate. That is one very, very important aspect. The other aspect, of course, is, and we've seen it just before Corona and during Corona, the German government started a new initiative for their approach towards Asia. And it is an Indo-German roadmap, an Indo-Pacific roadmap. So far, we were always talking about Asia-Pacific. The German government changed it, and now it's called an Indo-Pacific strategy. Or they call it Leitlinien, which is, I don't even know how to translate it, which is an Indo-Pacific, yes, you can call it strategy. And there the German government has basically said that we have to look beyond China. So far, there was a strong focus of the German government, but also of the German industry towards China, which is understandable. It's a huge market and you have to be in China, there's no doubt about it. But we have to look beyond China. And there certainly India has a strong role to play. It'll be the largest populated country in the world. It is the country with the youngest population. It is the country with the largest growth potential. And so from that angle, German companies have been looking at it in India and they will look at it. There's no doubt about it. But of course, what we also need is ease of doing business. And there also India has made some efforts, but it's not enough. And so from that angle, I think once the pandemic is over, then India really has to go all the way out to improve the ease of doing business, to make sure that it's much easier to come to India, to work in India, to stay in India. And this is something which, of course, is not only a challenge for German companies, it's a challenge for many Indian companies or any other company in India. And we know India is not easy, it's complex. It has the various states, so quite comparable with Europe. But India has to catch up, and India can catch up. So from that angle, the status at the moment of ease of doing business, somewhere in the 60s, is way too high. India has to be at least in the 20s, if not 10. And that is something where the Indian government has to improve. They know it, and they will have to do it. And then the Germans will come. There's no doubt about it.
Before I really move from the economic front, I would still like to, ask you one more question about the companies taking, we spoke about the dual education system, and I mentioned to you about how German companies are adapting and taking the students, and then they get on the training is offered online. Now, could you dwell a little bit more upon that? Because I'm sure you are aware of the fact that in India, the industry academia is not happening the way it ought to happen. So could you a little bit dwell upon that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. In Germany, still today, about 50% of every school leaving generation goes through that vocational training, which is training on the job, 2 to 3 years, thoroughly in the companies and in the training centers. It's all organized by the Chambers of Commerce and Industry. And this is one of the cornerstones of the German success story.
Yes.
It also has to do with the loyalty of the staff, because many of the youngsters who join the companies right after school, and by the way, they get a contract. The company is employing them from day one, even though they don't know anything.
Correct.
And this is a commitment that is a bond that holds for life. So many of these youngsters who joined the company, actually sometimes in the second or third generation, who joined the companies, they will stay with the company.
Wow.
They may, after their apprenticeship, go for higher education, but they come back. So that loyalty factor is a very, very important aspect. And this is certainly one of the success stories of the German system. Now in India, the approach is different. In India, the companies are saying, well, why should we employ someone who we're even supposed to teach? That doesn't work. And I always have that little joke, the discussion between the HR guy and the finance guy. The finance guy tells the HR guy, what are you doing there? Employing these youngsters whom we're even supposed to teach. What if we teach them and once the teaching is over, they leave? So the HR guy tells the finance guy, well, what if we don't teach them and they stay? So it is not an option. You have to skill them. And this is what we as the chamber have been propagating for the last 30 years, starting our own training center in Mumbai, and then also in other cities. And we have more than 70 partner companies who do the practical training while we are doing the theoretical training. And we have an alumni of way beyond 2,000 people who are now employed with these German companies globally. They are all over the world. And so skilling is one of the core elements of the German success story. We call it also lifelong learning.
Yes.
So it is not only the training at the beginning. We as the chamber, we do a lot of on-skilling where we skill people who are already employed with the companies. And we skill them over weekends, over a year. It's a weekend program where these people are coming over weekends, over one full year to get additional skills. So training is one of the cornerstones. And I can tell you, the German companies in India are very supportive, but we also have quite a few Indian companies who are very supportive. And of course, now also the Indian government has understood the importance of skilling. And so many of the German companies have actually adopted ITIs, where they come up with a curriculum that is like the German curriculum, where they provide the machinery, where the youngsters are skilled. So it's working, but more has to be done. You're absolutely right.
Now, Mr. Steinrücke, thank you very much so much for the really detailed insight on the business part. Now let me move to slightly to the cultural part now. See, of course, our two countries are culturally very different. But where do you see do you see really a largest stumbling block, and what advice would you really give to Indian and German business people to avoid them?
Well, you're absolutely right. And when you look at the Indo-German history, as I said, 500 years ago, the first traders came, but 300 years ago, the first linguists came. So the languages of Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam was actually documented and written by German linguists who came to India in those days as missionaries. And they documented these languages. They wrote books about it. The first Bible in Tamil was written by German, and Bartholomeus Ziegenbalg was his name. And that was 300 years ago when he came to Trincobar, which is today in, of course, Tamil Nadu. And then, of course, we have Max Müller, the famous Indologist, who basically documented and analyzed the Indian myths and mythology. And interestingly enough, he never was in India. He was a professor in Oxford who prepared British civil servants to come to India. And of course, today, India is the only country in the world where the Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Institute, is not called Goethe Institute, like in all the countries in the world, but Max Müller.
Yes. Yes.
So indeed, these cultural ties are very strong and very close. And this is also one of the reasons why Germans feel so comfortable in India, but also why Indians feel so comfortable in Germany. When you look at it, maybe the most dramatic development in the last 20 years that I spent in India now was the number of Indian students studying in Germany.
Yes.
It has skyrocketed. We are now talking about almost 30,000 Indian students studying in Germany. By the way, more than in the UK. That is a dramatic development we've seen in the last years. And they are very comfortable. Also, interestingly enough, 70% of these students are studying engineering. We also have lawyers, by the way. And
yes,
so
I know Heidelberg is the best law school, I'm told.
Heidelberg is the best law school, my alma mater, by the way. And many of them, the engineers, they're studying in Aachen, they're studying in Munich, they're studying in Darmstadt, just to name a few of the technical universities in Germany that are very, very popular with Indian students. So from that angle, I think the cultural bonds are very much there. And also when we had the Germany year 2011-2012, one of the most spectacular events, I would say, was the fusion, one could say, between A.R. Rahman and the Babelsberg Film Orchestra. Mm-hmm. He wrote a song for them. They came to India on a tour, playing with him, and he played with them in Potsdam, close to Berlin. And that was absolutely spectacular. And also, interestingly enough, sponsored by a German family-owned company, the company Lab Kabel. And this is also very typical. You know, German companies, even Mittelstand family-owned companies, when they are convinced of a project, they are with you.
Great. No, also, I know for a fact that a lot of Indian movies, for that matter, when they are featured or when they are called upon to display their movies in Berlin Film Festival or in some other part, you know, it's a great pride and honor for them in India.
Absolutely. Shah Rukh Khan is always at the Berlinale. And actually, when you look at the history of the Indian film industry, actually, it's a German history. So the founder of Bombay Talkies, the co-founder of Bombay Talkies, was a German filmmaker, Franz Osten. Mm-hmm. And he came to India, and he, in those days, produced the first Indian blockbusters or the popular movies, like, for instance, the Twist, I think it was called The Twist of the Dice. Mm-hmm. He produced that film and many, many other films. On the other hand, his brother was the founder of the Bavaria Film Studios in Munich, which till today are the largest German film studios. And so from that angle, we have a lot of links between the German and Indian film industry.
Great. Mr. Steinrücke, let me now move to the current pandemic situation. You know, as the economies emerge from the hardship of pandemic, international commerce will play, I guess, a key role in recovery. Now, how can we ensure that Indo-German commerce will have maximum positive effect, and what is your forecast for the future?
Well, one thing is for sure, we need open markets. In the recent years, there was a tendency against globalization, whether it was the US or whether it was China or whether it were other economies. They were basically trying to close their markets. And this is something which, from my point of view, doesn't work. And Germany specifically is very, very much dependent on open markets. Germany is still the world's largest export nation. For Germany, export is critical.
Yes.
And therefore, but we're also, by the way, one of the largest import markets. And therefore, we need open markets. And that is something which is absolutely critical. And India has started with its self-reliance campaign, which is understandable because India always has a trade deficit. It's importing more than it is exporting. And from that angle, it's understandable that India says we want to be more self-reliant. But as Prime Minister Modi said, this does not mean that India wants to close its market. No, in contrary, they want to open the market and they want to, of course, make in India, but they also want to make in India for the world. Now, with an integrated system, and we can see it, for instance, I mean, one of the best examples is the vaccines.
Yes.
The corona vaccine has more than 300 items that go into that vaccine. Of these items, around 200 are imported from the US. By the way, 100 are imported from Germany. So this is an example how even India, in a crucial element, like vaccines, and the world's largest vaccine manufacturer is, of course, the Serum Institute in Pune, is depending on open markets. So it doesn't work otherwise. Of course, you can have certain items that will be manufactured more in India. There's no doubt about it. But without open markets, there is no innovation. Without open market, there's also no competition. And we also know without competition, there's no growth. So we need open markets. And we've seen it with the US and China conflict, what it means when markets try to basically close themselves. It does not work. And therefore, after the pandemic is over, the most critical thing is that we have open markets. And there, I think India and Germany can be the front runners.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree with you. In fact, I strongly believe that this pandemic, whilst it is disastrous and it is very painful to know the number of deaths that is happening across the globe, but I would think the positive side is that we really have got an opportunity to reboot, I would say, not only the economy, but the environment, and most importantly, the education system. And I'm glad, Mr. Steinrücke, to mention you that I know for a fact, a lot of universities globally are talking of common curriculum. They're talking of common evaluation methodologies. And this will go a long way in improving the world. It will go in a long way to improve the whole human race. So finally, looking back on your years of experience in India, could you share some of your favorite memories and which especially you would like to cherish?
Well, as I said, the first Indian woman I met in my life became my wife for life. We have two wonderful children. They are sort of our best Indo-German joint ventures that I know. So that certainly has been important. But also for me, Indo-German Chamber of Commerce has been my life now for the last more than 2 decades, almost 3 decades. I've been associated with the chamber. And India, Bombay is the city where I have lived the longest in my life. I've lived in many beautiful cities. I lived in Vienna, I lived in Geneva, I lived in Hamburg, I lived in Heidelberg, in Berlin, beautiful cities. But I never lived as long in a city as in Mumbai. And I never lived in a city twice. I always moved on, but Mumbai, I came back. And so from that angle, Mumbai is absolutely important for me. And I've seen all the changes that Mumbai has. I can still see them as they are now there. But the friendships in India, the bonding is something very special. And so from that angle, the last so many years have been very important for me. You mentioned the culture side. As you may know, my wife has a gallery for contemporary Indian art. We even used to run a gallery in Berlin. So also when it comes to culture, India is very important for me. I'm little active in the Melli Mehta Music Foundation that Maestro Zubin Mehta has started in the name of his father. And we are educating, teaching about 1,000 young Indian kids from very often very simple background in Western classical music. So that is also an element of activity that I really, really enjoy. And therefore it is business, but it is also culture that comes together. And that is something for me very special.
All that, Mr. Steinrücke, all that I can say is that I must wholeheartedly thank you personally for your incredible services to India. And we all will remain indebted to you for your continuous support to India and the Indian business, the culture. So once again, Mr. Steinrücke, thank you very much for your valuable time and insight. It has been really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Also a pleasure for me to talk to you. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Indian Chamber of Commerce, LawSICO, and the India SME Accelerator Network for supporting this talk. Let me conclude our talk with the humble prayer to the Almighty to bestow mankind with the right spirit to fight the coronavirus and help restore peace, prosperity, and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you very much.